The rain was relentless that Thursday evening, drumming against the thin roof of the small, aging house on the edge of Rosefield, Virginia. Inside, the air smelled faintly of chamomile tea and damp wood. Evelyn Evie Carter, 19 years old and bone-tired, set down a tray on the coffee table. On it was a chipped mug of tea and 2 pills for her grandmother, Martha. "Nana," Evie said softly, crouching beside the couch. "You need to take these before they lose their strength." Martha, her frail frame wrapped in a faded quilt, gave her a tired smile. "Sweetheart, you've been on your feet all day. I should be taking care of you." Evie shook her head, brushing away a wet strand of chestnut hair that had escaped her messy bun. "We both know that's not how this works." They shared a quiet moment. Outside, the wind rattled the window frame. Earlier that evening, Evie had walked home from the diner where she worked the night shift. The neon sign had flickered as she left, and the scent of fried onions still clung to her clothes. As she rounded the corner toward their street, her eyes caught the gleam of something unusual, a sleek black sedan parked awkwardly by the curb, hazard lights blinking. Beside it stood an older man in a gray overcoat, clearly out of place in the worn-down neighborhood. His silver hair was neatly combed, but his brow furrowed with frustration as he stared at a deflated tire. "You okay, sir?" Evie called out, stepping closer under her umbrella. The man looked up, relief softening his features. "Not really. My son usually deals with these things, but he's abroad at the moment. I'm afraid I'm useless with cars." Evie glanced at the tire, then back at him. "Lucky for you, I'm not. Hold on." She dashed across the street to borrow a jack from Mr. Taylor, their neighbor. Kneeling in the rain, she worked quickly, her cold fingers steady. The man watched, equal parts surprised and impressed. "You must do this often," he remarked. Evie laughed lightly. "Nope. But when you grow up here, you learn to fix a lot of things yourself." When she was done, she stood and handed him the jack. Rainwater dripped from her sleeves, her breath puffing in the cold air. "Thank you," he said sincerely, pulling out his wallet. Evie shook her head firmly. "No need. Just get home safe, okay?" The man studied her for a moment, then smiled, the kind of smile that hinted at future plans she couldn't yet see. "I'm Arthur Blake." "Evie," she replied, returning the smile. Then she turned and walked into the rain, unaware that this chance meeting would change everything. The next morning was quiet in Rosefield, a thin veil of mist curling above the rooftops. Evie was folding laundry when she heard a knock at the door. She wiped her hands on her apron and opened it to find the man from last night, Arthur Blake, standing there, holding 2 brown paper bags that smelled faintly of fresh bread. "Good morning, Evie," Arthur greeted, his voice warm. "I thought I'd repay you for your kindness yesterday." Evie blinked in surprise. "You really didn't have to." "I insist," Arthur interrupted gently, stepping forward just enough for her to take the bags. Soup, bread, some fruit, and a pie from the bakery down the street. "Martha, isn't it? I thought she might enjoy it." Evie hesitated for a second before stepping aside. "Come in. It's warmer inside." Arthur entered, his polished shoes clicking softly on the worn wooden floor. Martha, still resting on the couch, looked up with polite curiosity. "Nana, this is Mr. Blake," Evie introduced. "He's the man I helped last night." Arthur smiled kindly and set the bags on the coffee table. "Your granddaughter is extraordinary. Most people would have walked past an old man stranded in the rain." Martha chuckled weakly. "She gets that from her mother. Always had a heart bigger than her pockets." Arthur's gaze softened. He stayed for a cup of tea, asking about the town, the neighbors, and Evie's work. She told him about her shifts at the diner and occasional cleaning jobs, though she avoided mentioning the bills piling on the counter. Before leaving, Arthur glanced at Evie with a thoughtful expression. "I'll be back to check on that pie. Someone has to make sure it's properly enjoyed." Over the next week, Arthur became a regular visitor. Sometimes he brought groceries, other times just conversation. He helped repair the squeaky front door, fixed a leaky kitchen tap, and once showed up with a bouquet of daisies because the room needed color. One afternoon, as they shared tea, Arthur leaned back in his chair. "You remind me of someone I know," he said. "Someone my son should meet." Evie laughed lightly. I doubt someone like me would have much in common with your family." Arthur only smiled, not arguing, but the spark in his eyes suggested he knew something she didn't. That evening, as Evie washed the dishes, Martha spoke quietly from the couch. "He's a good man, Evie. And good people, they don't come into your life for no reason." Evie tried to dismiss it, but a part of her wondered. Who exactly was Arthur Blake? And why did she feel like her life was slowly shifting into something she couldn't quite define? The day was brighter than usual in Rosefield, the early autumn sun casting golden light over the sleepy streets. Evie was hanging laundry in the backyard when she heard the distant hum of a car, smooth, deep, and clearly not from around here. Moments later, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up in front of her house. The car door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a tailored navy suit that fit him like it had been sewn for him alone. His dark hair was neatly styled, his jaw sharp, his expression unreadable. Evie froze, still holding a damp bedsheet. He approached with measured steps, the polished leather of his shoes clicking against the cracked pavement. "Evelyn Carter?" he asked, his deep voice carrying a hint of authority. Yes." Evie replied cautiously. "I'm Lucas Blake. My father's been talking about you." She blinked. "Arthur is your father." Lucas extended his hand, and she noticed his cufflinks glinting in the sunlight. "And you must be the young woman who's been taking care of him better than I have." Evie shook his hand briefly, feeling the firm grip but also the cool distance in his tone. "I just helped him with a tire. Anyone would have done the same." Lucas's gaze lingered on her for a moment, taking in her simple cardigan, faded jeans, and the stubborn way she stood her ground. He gave a faint, almost amused smile. "Not in my world, they wouldn't." Inside, Martha was delighted to see Arthur's son. "So you're the mysterious Lucas," she said, eyes twinkling. "Your father has been singing Evie's praises for days." Lucas smirked slightly but said nothing. Instead, he set down a paper bag on the kitchen counter. "I brought coffee. From a place in the city. My father insists it's the only coffee worth drinking." Evie poured 3 cups, setting one in front of him. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," Lucas interrupted, his voice softer now. Over the next hour, the conversation was polite but tinged with something unspoken. Lucas listened as Evie talked about Rosefield, her work, and the upcoming town fair. She noticed he rarely mentioned himself, though his phone buzzed constantly with messages he ignored. As he was leaving, Lucas pulled an envelope from his jacket and slipped it under a book on the table. Evie didn't notice until after he was gone. When she opened it, she saw several crisp bills inside, enough to cover Martha's medicine for months. Her chest tightened. That evening, she stormed outside as Lucas was getting into his car. "Mr. Blake," she called, her voice sharp. He turned, eyebrow raised. "Yes." "This," she held up the envelope. "I can't accept this. I'm not a charity case." Lucas's eyes softened, and for the first time, there was no cool distance in his tone. "It's not charity, Evie. It's gratitude. And maybe an apology for not being here sooner." She hesitated, heart pounding, unsure whether to be angry or touched. The day was brighter than usual in Rosefield, the early autumn sun casting golden light over the sleepy streets. Evie was hanging laundry in the backyard when she heard the distant hum of a car, smooth, deep, and clearly not from around here. Moments later, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up in front of her house. The car door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a tailored navy suit that fit him like it had been sewn for him alone. His dark hair was neatly styled, his jaw sharp, his expression unreadable. Evie froze, still holding a damp bedsheet. He approached with measured steps, the polished leather of his shoes clicking against the cracked pavement. "Evelyn Carter?" he asked, his deep voice carrying a hint of authority. Yes." Evie replied cautiously. "I'm Lucas Blake. My father's been talking about you." She blinked. "Arthur is your father." Lucas extended his hand, and she noticed his cufflinks glinting in the sunlight. "And you must be the young woman who's been taking care of him better than I have." Evie shook his hand briefly, feeling the firm grip but also the cool distance in his tone. "I just helped him with a tire. Anyone would have done the same." Lucas's gaze lingered on her for a moment, taking in her simple cardigan, faded jeans, and the stubborn way she stood her ground. He gave a faint, almost amused smile. Not in my world, they wouldn't. Inside, Martha was delighted to see Arthur's son. So you're the mysterious Lucas, she said, eyes twinkling. Your father has been singing Evie's praises for days. Lucas smirked slightly but said nothing. Instead, he set down a paper bag on the kitchen counter. I brought coffee. From a place in the city. My father insists it's the only coffee worth drinking. Evie poured 3 cups, setting one in front of him. You didn't have to. I wanted to, Lucas interrupted, his voice softer now. Over the next hour, the conversation was polite but tinged with something unspoken. Lucas listened as Evie talked about Rosefield, her work, and the upcoming town fair. She noticed he rarely mentioned himself, though his phone buzzed constantly with messages he ignored. As he was leaving, Lucas pulled an envelope from his jacket and slipped it under a book on the table. Evie didn't notice until after he was gone. When she opened it, she saw several crisp bills inside, enough to cover Martha's medicine for months. Her chest tightened. That evening, she stormed outside as Lucas was getting into his car. Mr. Blake, she called, her voice sharp. He turned, eyebrow raised. Yes. This, she held up the envelope. I can't accept this. I'm not a charity case. Lucas's eyes softened, and for the first time, there was no cool distance in his tone. It's not charity, Evie. It's gratitude. And maybe an apology for not being here sooner. She hesitated, heart pounding, unsure whether to be angry or touched. CEO Lucas Blake spotted in small town. Mystery woman involved? Evie only saw it because a diner customer left the page open on their phone. Her stomach sank. The photo showed Lucas walking beside her at the farmer's market, carrying a paper bag and laughing at something she'd said. By the time she got home, a sleek silver convertible was parked outside her house. Standing beside it was a tall, glamorous woman in a fitted red dress and expensive heels, her dark hair cascading over one shoulder. Evie Carter, the woman asked, her voice dripping with condescension. Evie nodded slowly. I'm Vanessa Monroe, Lucas's fiancée. Ex-fiancée, Evie thought instantly, remembering how Arthur had once mentioned Lucas's broken engagement. But before she could speak, Vanessa stepped closer, her perfume thick in the air. You're the reason he's ignoring my calls, Vanessa continued. Do you really think you belong in his world? Do you know how many women would kill for his attention? And he's wasting it here. Evie's throat tightened. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Just then, Lucas's black Mercedes pulled up. He stepped out, his expression hardening as he saw Vanessa. What are you doing here? His tone was ice. Trying to save you from making a mistake, Vanessa shot back. She's not one of us, Lucas. Look around you. She gestured to the modest house, the peeling paint, the small garden Evie tended every morning. Lucas stepped between them. Evie's worth more than anyone I've ever met in your so-called world. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. You'll regret this. With a sharp turn, she got into her car and sped off, the sound of her engine fading into the distance. Evie stared at the ground, her hands trembling. She's right, you know, she said quietly. I don't fit into your world. Lucas turned to her, frustration and hurt in his eyes. Don't you dare let her decide your worth. But Evie stepped back. You don't understand. People like her will never let someone like me belong. For the next few days, Evie avoided Lucas, burying herself in work. She ignored his calls, answered his texts with short replies, and left the porch light off at night. When he finally caught her outside the diner, the afternoon sun casting long shadows on the sidewalk, he grabbed her hand gently but firmly. She's wrong, he said, his voice low but intense. If there's no place for you in my world, then I'll make a new one that fits you. Evie searched his face for any sign of doubt, and found none. Still, the seed of insecurity Vanessa had planted remained, whispering in the back of her mind. It was a crisp November evening when Lucas knocked on Evie's door, his face pale and tense. It's my father, he said before she could even greet him. He's not well. The doctor says we should prepare for a rough few weeks. Evie's heart dropped. She didn't hesitate. Grabbing her coat, she followed Lucas to the car. Arthur was lying in bed when they arrived, his breathing shallow. The house smelled faintly of antiseptic and herbal tea. Evie knelt beside him, gently taking his hand. "I'm here, Arthur," she whispered. His lips curved in the faintest smile. "I knew you'd come." From that day, Evie became part of Arthur's care routine without question. She brewed his favorite chamomile tea, read aloud from his old books, and made sure he took his medication on time. Lucas was there too, though it was clear he wasn't used to this kind of caregiving, his hands clumsy as he tried to change pillows or adjust blankets. One night, Lucas was fumbling with the kettle, scowling in frustration. Evie stepped beside him, her hand brushing his as she took over. "You're boiling water like it's a hostile takeover," she teased softly. A small smile tugged at his lips. "I don't know how you do this every day." Evie glanced at him. "Because when you care about someone, you find a way. Even if it's hard." Her words lingered in the air, and Lucas didn't look away. Something passed between them, unspoken but undeniable. As the days went on, their routine became seamless. Lucas handled phone calls with specialists. Evie handled the comfort and quiet moments Arthur needed. Sometimes they'd meet in the hallway at night, both checking on Arthur and exchange small, tired smiles. One particularly cold night, after Arthur had finally fallen asleep, Lucas joined Evie on the porch. The air was sharp, their breaths forming clouds in the dark. "You've done more for my father in weeks than I have in years," Lucas said quietly. "You've given him something I couldn't." Evie shook her head. "You've been here every day. That matters." Lucas's eyes searched hers. "That's not the only reason I'm here." Her breath caught. "Lucas, I came because I wanted to see you," he admitted, voice low. "Because every time I leave, I want to come back." The words landed heavy in her chest, melting some of the fear Vanessa had planted there. "I'm scared," she whispered. Lucas gave a faint smile. "So am I. But maybe that's how we know it's worth it." In that moment, sitting side by side in the cold, Evie realized her world had already changed. And no matter how it scared her, part of her wanted to hold on to this, to him, for as long as she could. By mid-December, snow dusted the rooftops of Rosefield, turning the small town into a quiet postcard scene. Inside Arthur's home, the mood had shifted. His color had returned, his voice was stronger, and his laughter was back, a sound that made both Lucas and Evie breathe easier. One snowy morning, Arthur insisted on sitting at the breakfast table instead of in bed. "I'm not going to spend the rest of my life staring at the ceiling," he declared, sipping tea with a grin. Evie set a plate of warm muffins in front of him. "Careful, they're hot." Lucas watched the exchange with quiet contentment. It had been weeks since the scare, and now that the crisis was over, a question had been growing in his mind, one he could no longer keep to himself. That afternoon, he found Evie outside, sweeping snow off the porch steps. She looked up, cheeks pink from the cold. "You know, I could hire someone to do that," he teased. "And miss my daily workout?" "No thanks," she replied, smiling faintly. He stepped closer, his breath visible in the icy air. "Evie, I don't want you and Martha to stay here through another winter like this." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Lucas said, choosing each word carefully, "come to New York. I've already found a place, not some huge, empty penthouse. A real home. Close enough to my office so I can be there for work, but small enough to feel like this." He gestured toward the porch, the modest street, the warmth inside. Evie blinked, processing. "Lucas, that's a lot." "I know," he admitted. "And I know you're not saying yes because of the money. You've never cared about that. But I want to make sure you and Martha are taken care of. Not because you need saving, but because I want you in my life. Both of you." Her chest tightened, in a good way this time. She thought of the sleepless nights, the laughter over coffee, the quiet walks to the market, and the way Lucas had learned to boil water without almost burning the kettle. Inside, Martha's voice called, "Evie, dear? Is that Lucas? Tell him I'll pack my sweaters." Evie laughed, covering her face briefly with her scarf. "I guess that's a yes from Nana." Lucas grinned. And from you." She lowered the scarf, her eyes meeting his. "You already know." Spring in New York arrived with soft breezes and blooming cherry blossoms. Their new home was a 2-story brick house with wide windows and a little garden Martha claimed as her own. Lucas kept his word. It wasn't grand, but it was warm. One afternoon, in Central Park, Lucas took Evie's hand as they watched kids fly kites. "You changed my father's life. You changed mine. Let me spend the rest of my life making yours beautiful." Evie smiled through happy tears. "You already have." And under the wide American sky, surrounded by laughter, they began the next chapter, together.